Welcome back. Or if this is your first time here, welcome. Tonight, I'm going to show you exactly what happened inside Nero's golden house when the sun went down and the doors closed to everyone except those with an invitation. Not the sanitized version. The real version. What the Roman historian Tacitus called the most prodigal and notorious banquet in Roman history. You're going to learn 3 specific Latin terms Romans used at these gatherings. The first is exiliti, the male prostitutes who rowed the emperor's pleasure barges, arranged by age, and, as Tacitus puts it, sexual accomplishment. The second is lupa, literally she-wolf, the slang for working women, a term with dark humor buried in it, since the she-wolf was also Rome's sacred symbol, the beast who nursed the city's founders. But there's a third term, one that described what Nero himself did when he dressed in animal skins and was released from a cage. I'll save that one for when we're deeper in. For now, consider this. In 64 AD, Nero's advisor Tigellinus organized a banquet on a massive floating raft in the middle of an artificial lake. The raft was covered in purple silk. Purple, the color that cost more than gold by weight, the color only emperors could legally wear. Gold and ivory fittings lined the edges. The rowers pulling the boats weren't ordinary slaves. They were catamites, selected and arranged according to their age and their expertise in specific acts. On the shore, Tigellinus had erected temporary brothels. Inside them, not common prostitutes, but aristocratic women, senators' wives, equestrians' daughters, compelled to service any man who entered. Opposite them, naked prostitutes performed what Tacitus calls indecent posturing and gesturing to advertise their availability. Tonight, you'll experience 5 distinct levels of entertainment that Nero provided. The first, the Coenatio Rotunda, the rotating dining room that mimicked the movement of the heavens while raining perfume and rose petals on the guests below. The second, the floating raft where class distinctions dissolved and senators' wives became available. The third, the spectacula, live performances that escalated from dance to something else entirely. The fourth, the wild beast game, where Nero himself became the predator. And the fifth, the imperial bedroom theater, where the emperor performed acts that would have destroyed any other Roman man's reputation. Which raises the question worth sitting with tonight. Why did Rome's wealthiest and most powerful men, senators, generals, men who commanded legions, willingly participate in spectacles that should have destroyed them? What was the machinery that made this not just acceptable, but expected? You think you'd never participate in something like this, but you've already done softer versions. Every time you've paid for premium access, the private room, the VIP section, the exclusive experience unavailable to ordinary people. So you've engaged in the same transaction. The difference is just honesty. Nero didn't pretend his banquets were about art or culture. He was direct about what was being purchased. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not Nero tonight, you're something more interesting. A Roman senator who's just received an invitation on purple-dyed papyrus, sealed with the imperial signet. You know what these gatherings are, everyone knows. But declining isn't an option. Not if you want your business interests protected. Not if you want your son appointed to a favorable post. Not if you want to wake up tomorrow. Let me show you what you're walking into. The Golden House rises from the ashes of the Great Fire. In July 64 AD, flames swept through Rome for 9 days, destroying 10 of the city's 14 districts. Nero seized the opportunity and the land. 300 acres in the heart of the capital, claimed for his private estate. His architects, Severus and Keller, built him not a palace, but a landscape, forests, vineyards, pastures stocked with exotic animals. And at the center, an artificial lake large enough to stage naval battles. At the entrance stands a 120-foot bronze statue of Nero, depicted as Sol, the sun god, its gold-leafed face visible from a mile away. A triple colonnade extends from the statue, stretching a full Roman mile. Before you even enter, you've been diminished. You've confronted his gigantic metal avatar and understood your own insignificance. When Nero first moved in, he said only this: "At last, I can begin to live like a human being." The Golden House contains 300 rooms. Almost none are bedrooms. Nero rarely sleeps here. This isn't a residence. It's a venue, a machine designed to transform wealth into access, access into power, and power into the illusion of divinity. You arrive at the 8th hour, early evening. Slaves take your toga praetexta and replace it with a synthesis, a lighter dining garment. You wash your hands in a fountain of Carrara marble, the water cold, piped directly from a mountain spring, scented faintly with lavender. A slave leads you through corridors whose walls are covered in frescoes by Famulus, the finest painter in Rome. The images show mythological scenes: Zeus abducting Ganymede, Achilles discovered among the daughters of Lycomedes. The colors are vivid under lamplight: ochre, vermilion, Egyptian blue, reflecting off gold-leafed ceilings. You're walking through a jewel box. You pass through a pentagonal courtyard, its floor covered in glass mosaic that catches and multiplies the light. 15 rooms branch from this space. One is called the Room of the Golden Vault, its ceiling entirely covered in gold leaf. Marble panels line the walls: Egyptian porphyry, pale Parian marble, green Cipollino from Euboea. Each stone imported at enormous cost, each chosen to demonstrate that distance, rarity, and expense are no obstacle to imperial will. Then, you enter the octagonal room. This is the Coenatio Rotunda, the rotating dining hall that the biographer Suetonius describes as revolving perpetually, night and day, in imitation of the motion of the celestial bodies. The room measures over 50 feet across. Its concrete dome contains an oculus at the center, open to the sky, framing the emerging stars. This dome is an engineering marvel, one of the first large-scale uses of concrete vaulting in Roman architecture. Hadrian will later copy the design for the Pantheon. Guests recline on couches arranged in a U shape around the central space. You recognize faces: Petronius, Nero's arbiter of elegance, who advises the emperor on matters of taste; Tigellinus, the Praetorian prefect who organized tonight's entertainment; several consular-rank senators whose expressions reveal nothing. They've learned the same skill you have: controlled expression, the appearance of comfort when comfort is impossible. You take your position on a couch, middle position, neither too prominent nor too withdrawn. As you settle onto the cushions, propped on your left elbow in the traditional dining posture, the first course arrives. Dormice stuffed with pork and pine nuts, served in honey and poppy seeds. Sea urchins from the Bay of Naples. Oysters from Britannia, each one brought in barrels of seawater to keep them alive during the month-long journey. Peacock tongues, flamingo brains, sow's wombs stuffed with fig-fed thrushes. Each dish represents not just expense, but logistical mastery, the coordination required to transport perishables across hundreds or thousands of miles. The armies of slaves maintaining temperature and freshness, the supply chains stretching to the edges of the known world. And as you eat, the floor begins to move. It's subtle at first, a gentle rotation you might mistake for wine-induced vertigo, but then you notice the view through the open walls shifting. The artificial lake appears, catches the last light of sunset, then disappears. The Esquiline hill rotates into view. The room turns, slowly and continuously, completing one full rotation approximately every hour. In 2009, archaeologists discovered the mechanism beneath this floor, a massive circular pillar, 13 feet in diameter, surrounded by arched braces. Above it, a wooden platform 16 meters across, with crescent-shaped cavities in the floor, designed to hold bronze spheres, ball bearings that allow the platform to rotate smoothly. The power source? Water. Water channeled from the Aqua Claudia aqueduct drives a series of gears beneath the floor. You're at the center of a revolving universe, commanded not by gods, but by Nero. Above you, the ceiling panels slide open. First comes the perfume. Rose oil mixed with saffron, misting down through pipes embedded in the ivory panels. In an era where a small vial of balsam costs a soldier's annual salary, drenching guests in scent is an aggressive display of wealth. The smell coats your throat, almost suffocating. Then come the petals, rose petals, dyed red and yellow and white, spiraling down from the ceiling, accumulating on the couches, in the folds of your synthesis, on the food itself. Slaves stationed above the ceiling feed roses through the pipes. The petals drift like colored snow. You've heard the story that a guest at a later emperor's banquet suffocated under the weight of falling petals, unable to break free. Whether true or exaggeration, the threat feels real. The delight of the spectacle is edged with anxiety. The shower could become a deluge at Nero's whim. The excess that entertains you could kill you just as easily. Between courses, performers enter the central space. A woman, Greek judging by her accent, dances in a sheer silk peplos that leaves almost nothing to imagination. The fabric clings to her body with each movement, revealing and concealing in rhythm. She's skilled. This isn't crude pantomime. This is art at the edge of acceptability. Her movements suggest, but don't quite depict the acts everyone is thinking about. The line is walked carefully, for now. A young man enters next, dressed as Ganymede. He's perhaps 16, his tunic short, ending mid-thigh. He performs a scene, Zeus, disguised as an eagle, abducting the beautiful youth to serve as cupbearer, and more, to the gods. The subtext isn't subtle. Several guests shift on their couches. You keep your expression neutral. More courses arrive. Whole roasted swan, its feathers reattached after cooking to create the illusion it's still alive. The meat inside has been deboned and mixed with thrush, lark, and nightingale. You drink Falernian wine, aged 20 years, worth more per amphora than most Romans earn in a year. The warmth spreads through your body, your edges soften. This is by design. Then Nero enters. He's wearing purple embroidered with gold thread, his hair styled in the Greek fashion, falling in careful curls. Beside him walks Sporus, a young freedman whose beauty caught Nero's attention 2 years ago. Nero's solution to preserving that beauty was direct. He had the boy castrated, not a full removal. Suetonius specifies that only the testicles were taken, using a method Romans called rubbing, which targeted, let's say, the parts that would have made him a man. The procedure was meant to prevent Sporus from developing masculine features, to freeze him in perpetual androgyny. Nero then married Sporus in a public ceremony in Greece. Full Roman wedding rites, dowry paid, bridal veil worn, torchlit procession through the streets. Now Sporus wears the regalia of an empress. Nero addresses him as lady, mistress, sometimes Sabina, the name of Nero's previous wife, whom Sporus resembles. That wife, Poppaea Sabina, died in 65 AD. The official story says childbirth. The rumor says Nero kicked her to death while she was pregnant because she complained about him coming home late from the races. The room doesn't fall silent as Nero enters. That would suggest shock, and no one can afford to appear shocked. But the conversation shifts in tone, becomes more careful. Nero reclines on the central couch, Sporus beside him. He picks at his food, but seems more interested in watching his guests. Specifically, watching for reactions, for anyone whose mask slips. The meal continues for 2 more hours. More wine, more performances, each slightly more explicit than the last. A mime troupe reenacts the seduction of Leda by Zeus as Swan. The swan costume is anatomically detailed. The actress playing Leda sheds her clothing as the scene progresses. The act itself is mimed, not performed, but the line between theater and reality grows thin. Then Tigellinus stands and announces that dinner is concluded. The real entertainment will now begin. You're led outside through gardens lit by torches toward the artificial lake. The night air is warm, carrying the scent of cypress, jasmine, something sweeter underneath. Music drifts across the water. Lyres, flutes, drums in a rhythm faster and more insistent than the dinner music. When you reach the shore, you understand why. The raft is massive, 50 feet across, covered entirely in purple cloth, gold and ivory fittings catching the torchlight. Smaller boats tow it slowly across the lake, their motion creating gentle ripples that catch the moonlight. The rowers are the exiliti, young men, shirtless, their bodies oiled to gleam. Tacitus notes they were arranged according to age and vice, categorized by appearance and specialty. Some boats carry older men, experienced. Some carry boys barely past puberty. You can request specific boats to ferry you to the raft based on your preferences. On the quays around the lake, the lupanaria have been erected, temporary structures with open fronts designed for visibility. Inside each one, women wait on couches. You recognize some of them. That's the wife of a senator you know, a man who spoke against Nero 3 years ago and has been politically neutered ever since. Her presence here is the price of her family's survival. Beside her, a younger woman, someone's daughter. Their faces show nothing, professional blankness. The same skill everyone here has learned. On the opposite bank, the contrast. These are the scorda, common prostitutes, barely clothed, lit by torchlight. They mime acts, they call out prices, they gesture with unmistakable meaning. Professional entertainers doing what they do every night, but on a grander stage. The juxtaposition is deliberate. On one shore, women whose status should make them untouchable, now available for any guest. On the other, women whose profession makes them always available, advertising without pretense. The social order that defines Roman life has been inverted. That's the point. You board a small boat. The rowers are young, 17, 18. One of them meets your eyes and smiles. The smile is practiced professional. You focus on the approaching raft. The raft rocks gently on the water. Purple cloth creates semi-private sections, not rooms, suggestions of privacy. You can hear sounds from neighboring sections, laughter, conversation, moans. The water laps against the raft's edges with a sound like breathing. Incense burns somewhere, frankincense, heavy and sweet, mixing with the smell of the lake and the torches, and dozens of perfumed bodies. Women circulate among the guests, some patrician, some professional. A woman approaches you. She's perhaps 25, dark hair arranged in the Greek style, her tunic Egyptian cotton, semi-transparent, expensive. In the torchlight, you can see the outline of her body through the fabric, the silhouette of her figure through the fabric. Her skin is smooth, oiled with something that catches the light. Her perfume reaches you before she does. Rose, and something muskier underneath, something warm. She smiles, and the smile seems genuine, or she's skilled enough to make it seem so. Perhaps those are the same thing. She introduces herself as Julia, not her real name. You both know this. She asks where you're from, what brings you to the capital. Her voice is low, designed for intimacy, even in a crowd. The questions are social lubrication, a buffer before the transaction. Her hand rests on your arm, light, testing your response. Her fingers are soft, no calluses. Whoever she is, she doesn't scrub floors. She leads you to a draped section, pours wine from an amphora into cups of Alexandrian glass. She reclines beside you on the cushions, close enough that you can feel the warmth of her body through the thin cotton. Her hand moves from your arm to your chest, tracing a slow line. Her breath carries mint and wine. She asks what you'd like. Not crude, not direct. The question could mean anything, but her eyes hold yours, and the question means exactly one thing. What do you choose? You choose what everyone chooses. You choose participation, not because you're weak or corrupt, but because you understand the machinery. Guards are positioned around the raft's perimeter, Nero's men. noting who participates, who hesitates, who declines. To refuse is to mark yourself as unreliable. To participate is to survive. And Julia is beautiful, and the wine is warm in your blood, and the night is designed to make refusal feel absurd. You stay with her for an hour, maybe longer. The details of that hour are yours. When you emerge from the draped section, the moon has risen higher. The raft has rotated slowly on the water, moved by the towing boats. The torches on shore create a ring of fire reflected on the lake's surface. From somewhere, a woman's laughter. From somewhere else, sounds less ambiguous. But the night isn't over. Around midnight, a slave finds you. You're summoned elsewhere. The garden is enclosed by hedges, lit by torches that cast jumping shadows. 50 or 60 guests have gathered, arranged in a loose circle around a cleared space. At one edge of the clearing stands a wooden cage. Inside, you see movement, something that looks animal but isn't. It's Nero. He's wearing the skins of a wild beast, lion or bear, impossible to tell in the uncertain light. His face is visible, his eyes bright with wine or something else. Across the clearing, wooden stakes have been driven into the ground. Bound to them, men and women. Slaves, you assume, or criminals, condemned to die. Their bodies are exposed, their faces terrified. The cage door opens. Nero emerges on all fours, growling, moving like an animal stalking prey. The crowd falls silent. He prowls toward the bound figures. What happens next, Suetonius describes directly. Invederet inguina. He attacked their sensitive parts, to put it delicately. The verb is violent, invadere, to invade, to assault. He moves from stake to stake, performing what looks like a wild beast devouring victims. But the nature of the assault is humiliatingly intimate. The bound figures scream. The guests watch. No one moves. This is the third term I promised. Obiciendi feris, exposure to beasts. A method of execution reserved for the lowest criminals. But Nero has inverted it. He is the beast. The victims won't die from this, not tonight anyway. But they're being used. Their terror and pain is the entertainment. When Nero finishes, Suetonius uses confectus, exhausted, spent. He is dispatched by his freedman Dorophorus. The Latin leaves no ambiguity. In front of 60 witnesses, the Emperor of Rome plays the role of the passive partner. By every Roman standard of masculinity, this should be disqualifying. A man's status depends on dominance, never submission. To submit is to lose manhood, authority, the right to power. And yet tomorrow, Nero will still be emperor. The men watching will return to the Senate. They'll vote on legislation. They'll command legions. They'll maintain the fiction that Roman dignitas means something. Because to acknowledge what they witnessed would require acknowledging their own presence, their own complicity. The system sustains itself through mutual blackmail. Let's pause here and talk about the fifth level of entertainment I promised, the imperial bedroom theater. This isn't the first time Nero has performed passivity in public. 2 years ago, during a banquet organized by Tigellinus, Nero went through a formal wedding ceremony with a freedman named Pythagoras, not as the groom, as the bride. He wore the flammium, the orange bridal veil traditionally worn by Roman women. Witnesses were present, a dowry was paid, the wedding couch was prepared. And then, as Tacitus records with barely concealed disgust, everything was public, which even in a natural union is veiled by night. Suetonius adds a detail that Tacitus was too restrained to include. During the consummation, Nero imitated the sounds of a bride on her wedding night, in front of the assembled guests, as performance. So, with Sporus, Nero plays the husband to a castrated boy dressed as his dead wife. With Pythagoras, Nero plays the submissive role. He occupies every role. He transgresses every boundary. And by doing so, he makes transgression the norm. If the emperor can be bride and groom, beast and victim, dominant and submissive, then what rules actually exist? Only the ones he chooses to enforce. This is why you can't leave his performances. Literally, cannot leave. When Nero sings, and he fancies himself an artist, a musician, a tragic actor, the doors of the theater are barred. Suetonius records that his recitals lasted for hours. No one was permitted to exit for any reason. Women gave birth in the audience rather than miss a note. Men feigned death so they could be carried out on biers, escaping as corpses. The performances were mandatory. The applause was mandatory. The appearance of enthusiasm was mandatory. A group of young men called the Augustiani, 5,000 strong, trained to clap in specific rhythms, led the response. If your applause was insufficiently energetic, you were noted. If you left early, you were noted. The surveillance was constant. This is the machinery operating in the background of everything I've described tonight. The raft, the lupinaria, the wild beast game, these are the spectacular displays. But underneath them runs the infrastructure of observation, notation, threat. You participate because you want to survive. You applaud because you want to survive. You forget because you want to survive. The night continues. More wine, more spectacles you'll try to forget. At some point, 3 in the morning, 4, you find yourself in the bathhouse, washing it all away. Hot water from underground springs. Steam rising, other men around you, also silent. What would anyone say? You leave the golden house as the sun rises. The streets are empty, except for slaves beginning their morning work, bakers starting their fires, water carriers making their rounds. You walk home through the neighborhoods that didn't burn, past the ruins of neighborhoods that did, collapsed walls, charred timbers, empty lots where families once lived. The contrast is obscene. Behind you, the golden house catches the first light, its gilded surfaces blazing like a second sun. The 120-foot bronze statue throws a shadow across the valley. Slaves are already dismantling the lupinaria, collecting the purple cloth from the raft, hauling away evidence. Preparing for the next time. There's always a next time. The morning air is cool, a relief after the heat and perfume of the night. Your synthesis smells of incense, wine, roses, and something else. Julia's perfume still clinging to the fabric. You'll have the garment burned. Your wife doesn't need to know. No one needs to know. That's the arrangement. That's what makes the system work. By the time you reach your own door, you've begun the strategic forgetting. Not the facts, those will stay forever, but the feeling. The moment you chose participation, the sounds from the stakes. You'll seal those away in a part of your mind you don't visit. That's how you'll survive. That's how everyone survives. Except some won't survive. A year after the night I've described, in 65 AD, the hatred finally crystallizes into action. The Pisonian conspiracy, named for Gaius Calpurnius Piso, the aristocrat at its center, brings together senators, senators' wives, daughters of Rome's wealthy elite, even members of the Praetorian Guard. Their goal, assassinate Nero and restore some semblance of traditional rule. One of the conspirators, a military tribune named Subrius Flavus, will later deliver his reason directly to Nero's face. I began to hate you when you became the murderer of your mother and your wife, a charioteer, an actor, and an incendiary. Notice what he lists. Murder, yes, but also charioteer and actor. For the Roman military aristocracy, Nero's degradation on stage was as damning as his violence. The public performances of passivity, the beast-skin games, the marriages to men, these weren't just private vices. They were attacks on the dignity of the Roman state itself. The conspiracy fails. Piso is forced to commit suicide. Subrius Flavus is executed. He asks that his grave be dug deeper, criticizing the slovenly work of the soldiers, and dies as a Roman should. Seneca, Nero's former tutor, is implicated and ordered to kill himself. He takes his own life in a warm bath, dictating his final philosophical thoughts while his students weep. But the conspiracy proves something. The machinery of complicity has limits. Push hard enough, degrade dignity far enough, and eventually men decide that death is preferable to participation. The Golden House stands for 3 more years. Then it falls. Let's pause here and ask, who paid for this? Not just the single night I've described, The entire system, the golden house, the banquets, the entertainments. The construction consumed a significant portion of Rome's annual treasury. Those 300 acres of prime urban land were seized without compensation from families who'd lost everything in the fire. The marble, gold, ivory, and precious stones were extracted from provinces through increased taxation. The labor, tens of thousands of slaves working in shifts to complete the construction in 4 years. Suetonius reports that one guest at a similar banquet spent 4 million sesterces, roughly $20 million today, on a single night where turbans were distributed as party favors. Another spent more for a rose dinner. These were guests contributing to Nero's parties, but the emperor's own expenditure dwarfed these figures. And the women, the meretrices, the high-class courtesans who attended by invitation. These were freed women who'd accumulated enough wealth to operate independently. They charged premium rates. They attended because the networking opportunities were worth more than the fee. Access to senators, equestrians, the emperor himself. The scorta on the opposite bank, different economics entirely. Low-class prostitutes earned 2 to 8 asses per encounter, roughly $5 to $20. They worked constantly, multiple clients per night, perpetually in debt, trapped in a system where they earned just enough to survive, but never enough to escape. And the aristocratic women in the lupanaria, they weren't paid at all. Their presence was service, compelled by political pressure, social obligation, or outright coercion. Their family's status depended on maintaining the emperor's favor. Sometimes that favor required this particular demonstration of loyalty. The machinery runs on different fuel at different levels. At the top, networking, access, proximity to power. In the middle, cash, straightforward transaction. At the bottom, debt, obligation, and the threat of worse alternatives. Every level feeds the same system. 4 years later, Nero dies. Rebellion spreads through the provinces. The Senate declares him a public enemy. He flees, and unable to kill himself, forces his secretary to stab him. His last words, "What an artist dies in me." The new emperor, Vespasian, tears down the golden house. The marble is stripped, the gold melted, the ivory salvaged. The artificial lake is drained and filled. On its site rises the Colosseum, a gift to the people, a reversal of Nero's seizure. The rotating dining room is buried under earth. The frescoes are sealed behind new walls, preserved by accident through the process meant to erase them. In the 15th century, a Roman teenager falls through a hole in the hillside. He discovers underground chambers covered in faded paintings. Raphael descends on ropes to sketch the designs by torchlight. He doesn't know he's in Nero's palace. The paintings he copies, the grotesque designs that will spread across Renaissance Italy, decorated the rooms where emperors became beasts, and senators learned silence. The Golden House influences the Pantheon. The Pantheon becomes a church. History preserves the art and forgets what the art served. So here's my answer to the question I posed at the beginning. Why did Rome's powerful men participate in spectacles that should have destroyed them? Because the Golden House wasn't just a venue. It was a machine for manufacturing complicity. Every senator who walked through those doors left with something he couldn't afford to expose. Every man who reclined on that raft became invested in the system's continuation. The transaction wasn't sex or wine or spectacle. The transaction was silence. Once you've witnessed the emperor in beast skins, once you've chosen Julia over refusal, once you've stood in the torchlight, watching things you can't unsee, you're bound, not by chains, by shared secrets. That's the genius of absolute power. It doesn't threaten you with death. It makes you complicit. After that, you protect the system yourself, because exposing it would expose you. The Golden House fell, the machinery didn't. It just found new operators, new venues, new ways to manufacture the same silence. If you found this worth your time, if the question of how power buys silence resonated, like the video. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more history that asks uncomfortable questions. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Refused the invitation, or walked through those doors like everyone else? Until next time, good night.